Nation, okay, that really explains why the government is, not following the Constitution, and they should be. Okay, 1 second. Ready in the back? Okay. Oh, let me have the ad, please. Yeah. Okay, that's okay. Yeah, this is a copy of the ad. I'm going to show you. This is the copy ad in USA Today, okay, of today, Friday, November 1st. What would life be in America be like without a constitution? A war without a formal declaration, a Patriot Act that destroys our rights, an income tax with no legal authority, a currency based on limitless debt, a privately owned central bank, a government that refuses to answer. Okay. Well, our next speaker is an expert in field of freedom. He is a radio show host personality, but in addition to that, he's very practical and has a lot of good tips and strategies that you could implement and put in use right now, immediately, to start living a free life. I had the pleasure of meeting him over 9 years ago in the freedom movement, and he's one of the few that I've seen that has stick-to-itiveness, tenacity, commitment, and organization follow through to actually make something happen. And he is going to be even a bigger, bright star in the freedom movement. And I'd like to invite you to please help me give a warm hand of welcome to Mr. Brent Johnson.
I never know when I'm going to move around, and so a standing mic tends not to do it. Anyway, I like to be able to look at you. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier, the sunshine patriot, will shrink from the service of his country in this crisis. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. 'Tis dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. Thomas Paine wrote those words. Freedom. The best definition of freedom I've ever seen comes from this tiny little book called Uncommon Sense. It says, written by a real American. Didn't even give himself a byline on it. And the best definition for freedom that I've ever read says that freedom means never having to ask those people whom you and I have allowed to run our government for us for permission to do anything. What do you most value? I mean most value in life. What thing, what person, what opportunity, what do you most value? Think of your most cherished possession, or maybe it's your child, or maybe it's your spouse, or maybe it's a family member. Who or what do you cherish more than anything? And what would you do to protect that person or thing? And what wouldn't you do to protect that person or thing? Freedom. Freedom. If you value freedom in that manner, you will do absolutely whatever is necessary to defend it, to preserve it. Freedom simply means the preservation of life, liberty, and property rights. That's all freedom is. And so, in looking at how to preserve your freedom, these are the three areas to examine. Life, well, friends, life is up to you. Okay, this is true of every living thing. You have the right to defend your life. So you get together with like-minded people, you, your family, your friends, together, you help preserve each other's lives. Even if those who are accosting or threatening those lives are wearing a badge. You know, it's pretty amazing. If you go over into some stranger's house and go knock on the door and say, okay, I'm imposing all kinds of rules on the people in this house right now. And if you break those rules, you're going to have to pay me money. They'd absolutely be beside themselves, call the sheriff, and have you arrested. But if you sidestepped and went to a costume shop and got yourself a nice blue uniform and cap and little tin badge and then walked and said, all right, you know, you folks are going to have to behave differently or you're going to have to give me money, they would go, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. The American people have been well trained. I propose to help you untrain that brainwashing. I cannot help you protect life, but I can help you in protecting liberty and property. Those are the other two areas of securing freedom. Since there's not a lot of time today, I'm going to gloss upon a lot of issues, none of them in sufficient detail. But anybody who wants to know more about anything I talk about, please come by and see me. You know, I'm not keeping information from you intentionally. This is all very valuable. Liberty is achieved, with all due respect to the truths in what Paimon says about filing this and documenting that, doesn't do it. Okay? With all due respect to that, freedom is achieved by the rescission of the Social Security number, the canceling of the voter's registration, and the canceling of the marriage license. Those are the three across-the-board elements that bind you to government jurisdiction. The principal one is the Social Security number, and you can indeed take back your permission for them to assign the number to you. The way you know this is effective, and I was the original guinea pig, but the way you know it's effective is that you're not asking anybody to do anything for you. You're telling them. If you knew you were king, if you knew with every fiber of your being you were queen, you were royalty, would you behave any differently when dealing with your public servants? And whatever I tell you I've done, and I've taught for almost 10 years with 100% success. I don't think anybody else can boast that. When the number is assigned to you, Social Security number, assignment is a commercial term in law, a term in commercial law. It's a two-part process. There is the assignment and there is the acceptance. You can't have one without the other. I can't sit there and say, I'm assigning you the job of my secretary, go get me coffee. You have to accept the assignment before you are bound by the job description. Same basic principle. Well, when you accepted the assignment in your Social Security number, which you either did if you applied for the number, or you did if you got it when you were a minor and turned 18 and failed to repudiate the number. Either way, you accepted the assignment of the number. Question, were you ever told before you accepted the assignment that having the number was voluntary, and that by accepting it you were waiving your God-given rights? If the answer is no, then the contract is unconscionable. You can take back your permission. You're not asking for anything. For them to assign their number to you, sever the contractual nexus, and just like an act of fraud, everything that's predicated on the number falls as if it never took place. That can be done, that has been done, and it is the necessary step to reclaim your God-given right to liberty. The voter's registration is an insidious deception. There is something called voting, which is a government-issued privilege. And there is something called suffrage, which is the right of every citizen. Under our system, rights come from God. Rights come from a higher source than government. That's the whole principle of Americanism, that the king's word is not law, that there are higher laws. And so, with the voter's registration, you'll always beware of the word registration. People are not to be registered. Cattle are registered. People are not registered. And it comes from the days of in Old England of the king. The king used to suffer lessers to act on his behalf, because after all, everybody was a lesser of the king. So he would tolerate somebody to act as his representative, his agent. That is suffrage. The right of women to get the vote was the suffragette movement. You have a right to suffrage. However, when you go to the voter's registrar and register as a voter, you're registering for a government privilege that across the board places you under government jurisdiction. Again, you cannot be sovereign, you cannot be the ruler of your life, the king, the queen, and also be subject to the government that is your servant. You can't do it. You are either sovereign, you are either ruler, or you are subject. One or the other. Each has their perks. But if you value freedom, if freedom is your primary motivation, then you cannot be subject. You simply cannot allow it to happen. And you can get rid of voter's registration with a letter of cancellation. So the last place you register to vote. Dear voter's registrar, please cancel my voter's registration. Send me notice that you've done the same. Sincerely, thank you. Certified mail return receipt. A copy should go to any other place if you know of one that you've registered to vote, but the primary and important one is the last place you register. And that really means you're no longer registered to vote. Now you might say, but I have a right to vote. You don't have a right to vote. It's a privilege. But even so, you can indeed become what's called a qualified elector. Cast your ballot under the right of suffrage. Certain things you wouldn't vote for because they're only voted for by federal citizenry, by those who are subject to federal jurisdiction. But most cases, you could cast your ballot in statewide, countywide, and U.S. House of Representative elections as a qualified elector. There's actually a sitting governor, 2 sitting governors of Colorado. One is Owens, the de facto governor. The other is the de jure governor, selected by the choice of the qualified electors in the state, who has an office in Washington and is working to get similar elections in the various states. The third element regarding liberty is the marriage license. Marriage license, unlike any other license, is an across-the-board surrender of sovereign rights. Most licenses only compromise your liberty with respect to the licensed activity. You get a driver's license, it has to do with when you are engaged in the act of transporting persons or property on the public roads. You get almost any kind of license. It will restrict you with respect to the licensed activity, but a marriage license is different. What a marriage license does is it brings the state as an interested party into your marriage and the fruit of your marriage. What is the fruit of your marriage? Your children. And so your earnings and your children, both of those, your earnings and your children are subject to government control. Judges have admitted in open court, you have a marriage license, we get to decide what happens with your children. The amazing thing is that the American people go along with it. If you go into nature, go into the jungle, try and take a baby from a mother. I don't care what the animal is. The animal is going to, at her own life, she will viciously attack you, even if she's smaller than you, to protect her baby. But here, I just show you papers in a badge, which I could just as easily print it out on my printer, and you say, oh yeah, I'll have to take it up with my attorney. Go ahead, take my children. Now, who would you say are the sick ones, the insane ones? So it is necessary to cancel licenses of that sort. In this case, the marriage license can be canceled. It really can be. Because all you need to prove your marriage is a marriage certificate. If you were married by a religious official, any faith, then the certificate is signed by the official and the witnesses. What is marriage, after all? Marriage is a contract. I promise to love, honor, I promise to love, honor. We have 2 witnesses. Certificate says, on this day at this time, I married this man to this woman, here are the witnesses. I just performed a ceremony. I prepared a marriage certificate. That's exactly what it is. It's your proof of marriage. So what is a marriage license? Well, a license is permission to do that which without a license would be illegal. So, marriage is a contract. Article 1, Section 10, Federal Constitution, the government is prohibited from obstructing the right of contract. In other words, contract is a right. Well, obviously it's not against the law to enter a contract. So what is a marriage license? And it goes back to the 1800s, before the so-called 13th Amendment freeing the blacks. Black people were considered to be subhuman. They were not afforded the same rights as whites. And when a black person wanted to marry a white person, he had to get permission in the form of an intermarriage license. Look it up in a law dictionary. Marriage license, you will see, it refers to intermarriage and miscegenation. Look those terms up, and you will find they refer to an interracial marriage. That's what a marriage license was created to be. It's a moot point today, regardless, because black people always had the same rights. They just weren't recognized by the Constitution. The rights come from God, not from the recognition of the people. As a result of that, all marriage licenses today are moot. But most certainly, what the license does is it brings the state as a party to your marriage. So you can cancel the license if you have a certificate. If you were married by a judicial official, your whole marriage is under the government, and the only way to cancel the license is through a divorce. Get remarried with a religious official. Now, this is not a statement of religion. This is a statement of law. Your rights are protected under common law, fundamental law, based on British ecclesiastical law, the Magna Carta, and the Holy Bible, and the Ten Commandments. It doesn't matter whether you are even, you could be an atheist, and your rights still come from a superior source, the God of nature, nature and nature's God. Superior source to government. So your marriage has to be under that law in order for it to be free from government control. Therefore, you cannot be married by a judicial official of any kind or a captain of a ship, because that's maritime law. This is just touching on the issues of reclaiming liberty. The Social Security number, the marriage license, the voter's registration. Moving on, the property is the third element in freedom. Property is secured, and this is kind of backwards, but it's the way it is. Property is secured by not having any. Basic precept in law: the owner of property is always liable for damage caused by that property. There's no exception to this. It doesn't matter if it's you, a corporation, a trust, or anything at all. The owner of property is always liable for damage caused by the property. So the key to preserving your property in today's climate is to not have any liability. Liability is like a magnet to those in government who seek to take your property. They look for the liability. And then they go after you and they track you down through that. If you have no liability, you're invisible. If you're invisible, they will not bother you. There are certain unregulated artificial entities which, using these, you can maintain practical control of the property without retaining the legal control of it, which carries with it liability. Specifically, pure trust organizations are a sound means of wrapping an ironclad wall of protection around your property. There are many, many trusts out there that have been attacked successfully. You should know that. There's only one issue of concern on trusts, and this is my specialty expertise, folks. Most people have not really studied common law trusts. I have. The only issue that matters in a trust relationship is who has legal control of the property. If you started out with legal control of the property before it was in trust, it went into trust, and today you have legal control of that property, then your trust upon attack will collapse. A judge will tell you, I don't care it's a trust, I don't care about substance or form, I care about one thing: who has legal control? My trusts have been attacked in their courts, and their attacks have failed because of this one situation. I had a client whose wife was divorcing him, and she wanted to pierce the trust veil where he had to put his business. And he calls me up, tells me what's going on. I said, have your attorney call me. I'll give him a little course in legal control, which I did. The attorney took the information, went into court, and the judge refused to pierce the trust veil because we had dealt with the issue of legal control. I have many people who've come up to me and asked me to review their trusts. I've literally reviewed hundreds of trusts. If you have a trust, I may well have reviewed the source of that trust. And I've only found one trust outside of my own that I'm confident would sustain any attack. And that trust is sold in Hawaii for about $5,000 a pop. And this is not to disregard any other trusts out there, because there may well be other trusts that would be sound. And if you do trusts yourself, I urge you to please ensure you've dealt with the issue of legal control. The most common tactic I've found is some companies out there that sell a trust and then they'll make you managing director of the trust. The problem with that is that they will give you all the same powers as the trustee, so that you don't need the trustee in order to do things. You can do it all. You can sign papers, sell things, whatever. That's called legal control. And it cannot exist in a pure trust relationship. It will cause what I call a fatal flaw. And so if you understand that one point, you can evaluate any trust at all out there. And you can write trust, if you're a trust writer, that will indeed sustain any kind of attack. I believe property should go into pure trust. Real property, vehicles, put a vehicle into trust, have it leased back to you. You're the lessee, not the registered owner. There's no jurisdiction over you. There's wonderful things you can do. You can virtually eliminate liability by placing valuable property in different trusts. John Kennedy had a cat. This is a true story. The cat scratched somebody badly on the face. He thought he'd sue. It was a Kennedy cat, and he did. Turns out when you're Kennedy, you don't own anything. And Kennedy had the cat in a PTO, a pure trust organization. And at the time of the lawsuit, the cat was the only thing in the trust. The guy sued. He won the case, and he was awarded the cat. True story. It's a true story. Do you know that Senator Ted Kennedy has an oath of poverty, public oath of poverty? He owns nothing. That's why when Mary Jo Kopechne died in 1969 and Kennedy was drunk and the car went off the bridge in Chappaquiddick Bridge and she died and her parents sued for the wrongful death, they got a settlement from the insurance company of $30,000 from a Kennedy. And they were told, if you don't take it, you'll get nothing. Why? Because he owns nothing. He has no liability. Pure trusts are the answer. I, for 10 years now, have literally been living free. Real numbers, I got bank account, I got charge cards, I don't have any numbers attached to me at all. I am not subject to their jurisdiction. I do not recognize their authority. How have I done that? This is one of the ways. Now, when it comes to liquid assets or extensive assets, there is one other legal device that you should know about. It's called a corporation sole, S-O-L-E. Corporation sole is a scriptural society based on Old Testament law. It predates corporations, and as a matter of fact, corporations are kind of like a statutory reflection of corporation souls. The principles of a corporation soul are the presiding patriarch or matriarch, roughly equivalent to the president of a corporation, and the scribe, roughly equivalent to the secretary. Unlike a pure trust, in which the principles cannot be related to the person who starts off with the property, the reverse is true in a corporation soul. Unlike a pure trust, in a corporation soul, the principles retain legal control. You are acting as stewards. This is the principle. It's a scriptural principle that everything belongs to God and we are but stewards for his property. And so in the corporation soul structure, you're acting as stewards. You cannot be held liable for any grievance against the soul. The soul's assets cannot be held liable for any grievance against you, and the statutory courts recognize it. And the people who really pull the strings, the ones who really, the international bankers, they have all their assets in corporation souls, which means, from a psychological viewpoint, they'll never attack a soul. They leave them alone. Why? Because to attack your soul means to set the precedent to attack theirs, and they're just not going to do that. So what I recommend is you put liquid assets into the soul. You put solid, tangible, intangible assets, business, home, vehicles, whatever, into pure trust, and run the trust as a division of the soul, painting the umbrella of the soul's protection over the trust's already substantial protections, creating a situation where you have nothing. You may work for the trust, or you may represent the soul, but you yourself own nothing, meaning you have zero liability and the full enjoyment of your property rights. Again, if you want to know more about trusts, corporations, souls, by all means come by my table and I'll be happy to talk to you about it. I'll get you information about them. We can put them together for you if you like. But I want to move from this brief overview into what I really want to address here. Earlier, Paymon spoke correctly about how it's not the redemption process or this process or that process. These things are generally, on the face of it, ineffective. Not because there's anything wrong with them, but because there is a lack of understanding at the environment in which we are living. Very educated, well-meaning legal scholars have put together the most brilliant material and brilliant briefs that are, from a legal perspective, absolutely right on, and they're sitting in jail. Why? Why? The reason is very simple. It is the character of those people who are running the government for us. They don't obey the law. The IRS, which is not a government agency, the people who work for the IRS don't obey the Internal Revenue Code. Judges don't obey the constitutional limitations placed on them. The president doesn't obey the constitutional limitations placed on him. The attorney general doesn't obey the constitutional limitations based on them. Neither do the police, neither do the sheriffs, neither do the recorders, neither do the legislators. So in all three branches, you have criminals. Criminals. In the 1920s, they wore these brim hats and these little suits, and they came in with, their machine guns, and they said, okay, you pay up and we'll give you protection. Today, they've modernized the system, but it's no different. You're dealing with criminals, and the law will not protect you from a criminal. This is the hardest thing for people to get, because they've studied the law and they think, well, if I just do it this way, I got to file that paper and then this document, and then I will have solved it. They just didn't do it right. It's the same mentality of the socialists, by the way, just for a different purpose. The socialists constantly make the same argument. The reason socialism has failed in the past is because they didn't do it right. If the right people did it, it would work. It's the same thing. The law, it should be obvious, will not protect you from a criminal. Think about it. If the law would protect you from a criminal, there'd be no murderers, no rapists, no arsonists, no robbers, because there are laws against these things. So clearly the law will not. So what do? Yes, you should wrap the law around your behavior and your efforts so that you're in a position to make a proper stand. But don't rely upon the law by itself. There is a psychological battleground right before us. And if we play it correctly, there are practical things that we can do to preserve our life, our liberty, and our property in today's America. If psychologically you are faced with a choice, and it's going to cost you more, whatever, whether it's in currency or grief or whatever, it's going to cost you more than you're going to get, you're not going to do it. It doesn't matter what it is. If you think it is going to cost you more than you're going to get, you're not going to do it, no matter what it is. If you can make government officials think that by pursuing you, it's going to cost them more than anything they could possibly get, they are going to leave you alone. We are so much smarter than they are, and if we play the psychological arena, we will defeat them, and it happens all the time. And I'm just going to give you a few areas I want to touch on here, okay? Let's start with travel. These are just practical things that you can understand. Okay, regarding travel, I don't carry a state-issued license under any circumstances. I carry an international driver permit. Now, the IDP is invalid in the country of issue, so mine is issued in Nicaragua, which means I'm not allowed to use it in Nicaragua. But anybody who professes to be a member state of the United Nations must honor the IDP. And sure enough, okay, if I've been stopped, which is not, and I rent cars with it, I fly with it, if I've been stopped, they let me go. They leave me alone because the vehicle is not registered to me. It's registered to a trust and then leased back to me, so I'm just the lessee, not the registered owner. I don't have a social security number. I don't have their state-issued driver's license. Thus, whatever ticket he might want to give me, he can't enforce it. So it's a waste of his time. Time is money. The police are like salesmen. Their job is to collect revenue. That's correct. So, is he going to spend his 20 minutes writing me a ticket knowing that there's nothing he can do to get me to pay it? Or is he going to give me a warning? And I'm telling you, consistently, I haven't been harassed by cops at all for I don't remember how long. And my producer, who's not with me this weekend, she was stopped a couple times over the last month. Each time she was waved on. Always carry a portable tape recorder and disposable flash camera in your glove compartment. If you're ever stopped, you turn the tape recorder on, put it in the side over here, and if the cop threatens you, you pull out the flash camera. Now, you might say, well, he might take it from me. If you understand that you're living in a war zone of sorts, a war zone in which the government has literally declared war on the American people. I mean, literally. FDR declared the United States citizenry to be the enemy of the government. And that's never been changed. And so you're literally in a war zone. And in a war zone, wherever possible, don't travel by yourself. You want to witness in case something happens. But I always carry a portable tape recorder, make sure you have good batteries, and disposable flash camera. If you're ever stopped, never argue with a police officer. The police officer is doing a job. He is following his training. He is following his job description. He's prepared to deal with people who argue with him. He is not prepared to deal with people who take a different tactic. In the first place, the police are trained that at a traffic stop, you are to gather evidence at the scene. Okay, the scene of the crime. So, you know, they do it primarily with good cop, bad cop. The bad cop's the first one you see, the one you're hostile to. He takes your ID and all that. You never give him anything until you get his ID. And if he doesn't want to give it to you, and if he threatens you, you tell him, officer, you call your sergeant right now. We're not going any further with this. You call your sergeant. Get him over here right now. I want to see your sergeant. I'm not talking to you, officer. You want to see how quickly you get cops to suddenly want to, oh, crap, what did I just do? Because they're not trained to deal with that. They're the product of their training. They're not some big bugaboo to intimidate you. They're trained to intimidate you. I had a prosecutor who, I do a bi-weekly show I co-host in Indianapolis with Stan Solomon. A couple months back, Stan had a prosecutor on. The Indiana Supreme Court had just ruled on the legitimacy of certain random checkpoints. And the prosecutor was on talking about it, and he said because government has a legitimate regulation, concern over the regulation of traffic. And I said, well, that's true, prosecutor, but remember, traffic is defined in Black's Law Dictionary as commerce. And anyway, the people don't have to cooperate. The police are trained to intimidate them. And the prosecutor said, he's right. The police are specifically trained to walk up to your car and go, you don't mind if I look inside, do you? And you're supposed to go, oh, no, I don't mind at all. Or if you go there, well, no, I'd like to see a warrant, the cops are being trained to use that as probable cause to give you a hassle. So what do you do? What do you do? You don't mind if I look in your car, do you? Well, officer, do you have any reason to believe I've done anything wrong? No, it's just routine. Well, then I think I would like to see a warrant. Now he's admitted he has no probable cause. He can't use that against me. I just manipulated him when he was planning to manipulate me. It's simple. It's not difficult because these people are not smart. They are, no, I'm very serious. If you have a business and you want to hire somebody, okay, and it doesn't matter, whatever you want them to do, you want them to troubleshoot your computers. You look for somebody who knows how to troubleshoot computers. You have job qualifications. You want them to paint your house. You look for somebody who has an understanding of how to paint. In other words, when you're hiring somebody, you have specific job qualifications for that position, and you look for someone who satisfies those qualifications. When a government hires somebody, the first thing they look for is that you will do what you are told. So they get people who do what they're told. They don't know anything else. If you understand this, you can do to them what they're trying to do to you. But never argue with the police officer. Never talk to him. See, the good cop, when the bad cop goes back to his car, the good cop comes up the other side and he sits there, starts talking to you. I'll bet you don't need this. What? You're trying to get home to the good woman, right? And it says, yeah, and I just live a couple blocks away. My mind was off what I was doing for a second. Come on, can't you let me go? Look, buddy, I'll do what I can. Cop goes back, writes down, admits he was confused, didn't know what he was doing. Admits he lives in county, is resident. Guess what? You just testified against yourself. You lose. The only thing you say to a cop, am I being detained? And if the answer is yes, what's your probable cause? Get it down in your tape recorder, and then the rest of the things he says to you, you say, officer, I respectfully decline to answer that question. If he gives you a ticket, you across the face of it, refuse it for cause. Refuse for cause UCC 3-501. Put a date on it, and attach it to a judicial notice or a non-statutory abatement. And there's a website you might want to check out, okay, to learn about abatements. It's a very good website. And it is www.angelfire, angelfire.com/PR/truth/abatement.html. I'll repeat it. www.angelfire.com/PR/truth/abatement, ABATEMENT.html. If you missed it a second time, come see me later and I'll give it to you. But an abatement is a challenge to the process. It's essentially a non-statutory method of dealing with a public nuisance. And when you abate the ticket, it goes back to the cop, with the copy going to the prosecutor, so that if they do try and come against you without correcting the problems with the ticket, and there are always about a dozen problems with the ticket, then they're violating due process and you can go after them. So you have your abatement prepared in case you get a ticket, and you never go into their courts because they're not your courts when you have freed yourself from these people. I want to talk a bit about interest in property here. And before I do, there is a organization, I will wonder if anyone in this room has heard what I'm about to tell you. I only found out a few weeks ago, and it happened over a year ago. But your own California Coastal Commission last year was declared unconstitutional. Did anybody hear about it? No. No, it's been a very, very carefully, quietly kept decision. May of last year, on the grounds that it was violating the California prohibition on separation of powers, or against collusion of powers, the California requirement of separation of powers, by engaging in administrative and executive enforcement activities, as well as quasi-judicial activities, as well as legislative activities. It was an unconstitutional agency. The California Coastal Commission, being an unconstitutional agency, raises up an issue. When John Turner was speaking, it occurred to me an interesting tactic. The same might be applied to the Internal Revenue Service if somebody really wants to take it on, because they exercise both quasi-judicial and executive branch authority at the same time. So, just a thought. But your own California Coastal Commission is unconstitutional. And if, as this spreads, then this potentially can be a revolution for property rights advocates. Talk to you about preserving interest in property. There are two basic types of liens. I'll address them very, very briefly here. A lien is a device designed to ensure that an obligation is met. That's all a lien is. A lien secures your interest in property. There are two basic types of liens, common law liens and commercial liens. A common law lien is a lien placed on property over which you have lawful possession. The most common use of a common law lien is to secure your interest in real property you own, or real property in which you live, which is in trust. By using a common law lien, you deflect the bankers from any kind of a foreclosure. Here's how it works. You got a $100,000 home, you got $20,000 in equity, you got $5,000 in improvements, and you've lived there for 10 years, just as an example. 5 years, let's keep it down. A common law lien is, the amount of the lien is determined by your equity, improvements, and life experience. So you got $20,000 in equity, $5,000 in improvements, that's $25,000 in 5 years. There's no known formula, none that I know of, but I use the figure $3,000 a year, which is $250 a month. So you add $15,000 for your life experience. Total $40,000 lien. Now, a lien is paid in order of character, not in order of chronology. So the first lien paid in any situation is a mechanic's lien. Guy who built your house puts a lien on your house. Until you pay him, you don't get title to your house. The second lien paid in order of character is a common law lien. A mortgage is a form of chattel, but it's not a true lien. An IRS notice of lien doesn't even make the list. So here's what happens. The crops don't come in. There's a drought. Crops don't come in for 3 months. You can't pay the rent. Bank comes in. They're going to start foreclosure proceedings. They find a $40,000 common law lien on the property. That secures what the house owes you, what you've put into it. Now, you owe the bank $80,000. You only got $20,000 in equity, a $100,000 home. So you owe them $80,000. But they can't get their $80,000 until you get your $40,000, because your lien comes first. So they're going to have to sell that home for $120,000 in order to get their money back. What is the bank going to do? They're going to work with the homeowner. In other words, you don't lose everything because something unfortunate happens in your life. That's not the way America was created. That's not the character of freedom or a free society. The other kind of a lien is a commercial lien. A commercial lien is a lien you place on property over which someone else has lawful possession. Commercial liens are the liens that have been used to lien the property of government officials. There is a county recorder in Multnomah County, Oregon, that's where Portland is, who, when the sheriff came to take her car, she finally agreed to record the papers that she had refused to record. A commercial lien requires that you establish a claim. Don't go out and file commercial liens unless you first established a claim. However, you can establish a claim against government officials even, okay, simply by sending a true bill to them and then going through a process of public notices, notices of default, and ultimately filing with the Secretary of State with the UCC-1. Do not pursue commercial lien technology because you're trying to get rich. In the first place, if you lien a government official and try and collect on it after recording it here in the States, if it's a judge, the FBI is going to visit you. It doesn't matter that what you've done is lawful. If you're going to actually pursue collecting on a commercial lien, and if you've done it correctly, you pursue it through international means. You try and sell the note through international banking community. We might be able to help you with that. But there are numerous people who have contacts in the international community, and it's better to do that when you're dealing with liens on government officials, simply because they don't like it. Judges like to buy and sell and increase their estate. When they can't buy a stick of gum, they get very upset. Again, I'm only touching on these things. If you want to know more about them, please come and see me. Or pick up a copy of my book, and a lot of this is contained in there. Property taxes are not taxes on property. If they were, they would be direct taxes and therefore unconstitutional. Okay, it is not that we're under emergency war powers or anything like that and the Constitution is suspended. Property taxes are simply not taxes on property. The reason you pay property taxes is because you have availed yourself of government services which you are not required to use. What services? You recorded the deed. There is no law requiring you to record the deed. When you record a deed, it is very similar to registering a vehicle as a motor vehicle. You turn the title over to the state, you get back permission to use their property under regulatory authority, and the tax you pay is, and that's your warranty deed, and the tax you pay is for enjoying the privilege. Now, there's been much talk about allodial title. Allodial title means supreme ownership. Supreme title. The king has allodial title to the castle. But understand also that the nature of property tax, or rather property control, which is really the issue, is the #1 plank of the Communist Manifesto. Abolition of all private property ownership. The reason for that is private property, by definition, defeats socialism. If I can draw a line here and say, my own law, okay, none of your laws apply. This is my law. Well, if I can do that, then you can do it over here. You can do it over here, and the next thing you know, everybody's done it, and there's no socialism. And so that's why it's the #1 plank of communism, and that's why addressing the property tax issue, regardless of the law, cannot be done quietly. In the case of allodial title, all property that's ever been recorded has public debt attached to it, because the government takes recorded property and collateralizes it for loans. And so, unless you can actually eliminate that debt and find out the debt holder, you can't truly claim allodial title. There will always be a counterclaim. And I submit that quiet title doesn't do this, because quiet title depends on a negative response. It is not a positive declaration. It is essentially a default process. And the problem with that is that because of how important to those who would control your property, because of how important it is to them, they're not going to just let you go by with quiet title. And so I don't know anybody who's ever had true allodial title. But there are ways you can challenge property tax, but not without a conflict. Do not expect, like the IRS, that you could just do it and they won't be able to come after you. Okay, they will find ways of trying to force you into their corrupt court system. But you can unrecord the property, or you can challenge the classification of the property. All property is classified either agricultural, industrial, or residential. You have private property. Tell them to reclassify it as private. When they refuse, get into a discussion with them about why, and when they finally admit that they have it classified for tax reasons, now you have a legitimate challenge. You've reclassified my property without my permission for the sole purpose of taxation. I think we have to withhold property taxes pending the resolution of the dispute. There actually are some cases pending on this exact issue. A word about going to court. The psychology, if you do have to walk into that court or do choose to walk into that court. Several things you should do, but I'll only give you a couple of them right here. First off, Always bring your own court reporter. Judges go to lunch with their court reporters and transcripts magically change. Always bring your court reporter. Guy in Massachusetts, real estate sales, needs his car. That's where his living is. In Massachusetts, you get 3 tickets over a period of time. Your license suspended for 6 months automatic. He got his 3rd ticket, 94 miles an hour. He really was doing it. He had a state-issued license, social security number, tied in every possible way. This guy was screwed. The case was in southern Massachusetts. He went into Boston. He hired a court reporter, 25 years experience, federally licensed, state license. She charged him $125 for making the trip and whatever her per-page transcription fee. He introduced her to the judge. The judge hemmed and hawed. He said, well, you can't just bring anybody in here to be a court reporter. We have our own very good court reporter. So he introduced the woman. The woman showed all her credentials and everything. And I promise you, it went this fast. The judge said, well, this was also very unnecessary. You see, my docket is just so full, I'm going to dismiss this case. The guy walked. Here's another one. You walk into that same traffic case during arraignment, you might try something like this. Remember, I have my court reporter here. You always have your court reporter. Under the 6th Amendment to the Constitution, it requires that the court inform me of the nature and cause of this action. I would like to know, is this a criminal or a civil action? Now, all actions of this sort are civil because they depend upon your being in a licensing agreement. But the court cannot admit this because the state is a party, the state versus Brent Johnson. Therefore, if the state was a party to a civil action, it would have to be tried in federal court. So the judge will always tell you criminal, always. Well, this is a criminal matter. Let the record show that the judge has indicated this matter will be tried as a criminal matter. Now, Judge, the Constitution it seems to me the Constitution prescribes 2 venues for criminal prosecution. There's common law and there is admiralty law. In which venue is this criminal prosecution going to be tried? This is a piece of information the judge simply will not tell you because he doesn't want the people sitting in the public part of the courtroom to know. So he's going to say to you, for questions of law, you get yourself an attorney. Let the record show that the judge has failed and refused in his duty under the 6th Amendment to the Constitution to apprise me of the nature and cause of this criminal matter being brought against me, so that I may otherwise conduct my best, and you just keep going on. And the judge is going to interrupt you and say, this is statutory jurisdiction. Thank you, Judge. I never call them Your Honor. Thank you, Judge. Let the record show the judge has indicated that this criminal matter is to be tried as under the venue of statutory jurisdiction. Judge, in your chambers, you've got to have a copy of the rules and procedures of statutory jurisdiction. I don't happen to have them. Could I borrow yours so I can conduct my best defense? At this point, the judge is going to yell at you, I told you to get yourself an attorney. Let the record show. And you keep doing this. And what the judge is going to do is he's going to call a recess, call you into his chambers, and the case is going to be dismissed. Why? Because you're making it clear to the judge that if he pursues this against you, it's going to cost him more in control of his courtroom than he could possibly get from you. What I said earlier, if you approach it psychologically, it is much better off for the judge to get you out of his courtroom so he can take all those people over there and move them through the assembly line. Now, you may say that, oh, well, what if he waits to the end of the day when everybody's gone? No. You don't walk into that courtroom without 10, 20, 50 of your best friends there also, so that he never has the option of an empty courtroom. And you have your court reporter, and he knows that everything is actually going on the record. So whatever he does, he's not going to get to collect that. It's going to be a black mark on his record. He doesn't want you in his courtroom, and you are free. You know, I had a guy same guy who had actually gotten on an airplane with no ID, just to show that it could be done. He holds himself sovereign. At the time he was called, I think it was a traffic case. He was calling, he had a state-issued license. He still was all tied into the system. He walked up, his name was called, let's call him John Smith. They called John Smith, and he stood up and he said, "Are you calling John Smith the corporation or John Smith the man?" And the judge said, "What's the difference?" He said, "Well, John Smith the corporation is spelled in all capital letters. John Smith the man is in upper and lower case." The judge said, "I'm calling John Smith the man." So he walked up to the judge and said, "What can I do for you, Judge?" He said, "Well, I just want you to know I'm dismissing this case." Guy said, "Thank you, Judge," starts to walk away. He says he never knew of a judge so respectful. The judge said, "Excuse me, sir, sir." "Yes?" "Oh, you can get a copy of my ruling over there by the court clerk if you like." "Sir, you have a nice day." "Sir." Why? Because he held himself as sovereign. The judge knew by instinct that somebody who was royalty had walked into that courtroom and was to be respected. In this country, you are the nobility. You are the royalty. The psychology of freedom. We're smarter, we're more dedicated than our adversaries. The Constitution is only a whip and a chair to chain down the beast that is government. Now, what happens if you put a whip and a chair in a cage with a lion?
Delete the whip and jump on the chair.
Nothing happens. You need a lion tamer. We are the lion tamers, and we have been sadly remiss for generations in our duty, and now we wonder that the beast has woken up. And until we're willing to pick up that whip and that chair and whip that beast back into submission, we'll continue to need to have these kinds of discussions. Freedom. What are you willing to do to preserve freedom in your life? And what aren't you willing to do? Be careful about that last question. Freedom. Long live the Republic. Listen, thank you very much. If you'd like to come visit with me over there, I have my book available. I'll talk to you about anything else you'd like to know. God save the Republic. Thank you very much.
How was Brent, you guys? Good? Okay. Well, when we put these rallies together, one of the things that we try to do for you is to provide you not just education, which is important, that's a starting point, but also answers for you. And some of the people with answers don't get to have much of a time here because they're not official speakers, but yet they do have some interesting things that you might be interested in sharing. So I want to invite them to come on up and share a couple minutes about what they have available, so you get a little better idea what they have to offer you. So let me start with Walter McNeil.
Good morning. I'm Walter. Good afternoon. Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm Walter Nail. Good afternoon. About a year and a half ago, I had cancer. Then I had a massive stroke. And other things that led me to do some patriotic things, which I have over here. And we have patriotic t-shirts, flags, blankets, caps, scarves, and other items. So there are more items than you see. So if you need any information, I'll be glad to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Next we have Curtis Harkness, who's with Dennis, the videographer you see at the back. They have quite an array of video products. I'm gonna, Dennis, and Curtis is gonna take a couple of minutes to tell you guys more about some of the more, stuff that his favorites for you. Curtis.
Hi. I've been coming in to this rally that Payment has for many years, and we have an enormous selection. Actually, we have just a very few titles right now. I have so many videos I could literally fill from that end of the room to this end of the room, stacked about the way they are, of different titles. So if there's something that you're looking for, I've got probably some information for you. Anyway, what I do have out there is Luminazi 911. This was a video that I produced with Anthony Hilder, and just a sampling of a lot of things on sovereignty issues, traffic, IRS, dealing with tickets, just a lot of different things, property rights. So you come and talk to me, and I'll be able to give you a couple of ideas on some of the things that you might be able to do. Okay, thanks.
Okay, and next we have from the Robin from the Living Temple, which is a local store in the area. So for those of you who are in Orange County or Southern California area, I think you're very fortunate to have Robin. And it has a wonderful area of health and freedom material. Robin?
Hi, my name's Robin, and I have an organization called the Living Temple. Basically, we incorporate a lot of what Payman and his organization does, teaching people about thinking for themselves again, really. We cover everything from health topics, so we have books and videos on medical exposés, everything from cancer to AIDS to vaccines, genetically engineered foods. We have a lot of David Icke material, topics from 9/11 to Oklahoma, exposing what the governments and the corporations are up to. As you can probably tell by my t-shirt, we also promote hemp. Not so much for the smoking of it, although I'm not against that either, but more for the industrial uses of it. Truly amazing plant. So if anyone wants to learn more about what we do over there, please come visit the booth. We do have a store and a website up pretty soon too, so enjoy the rest of the event and please come by and check out the booth. Thanks.
Their store, by the way, is in the Old Town, is it German? Old World Village in Huntington Beach, a beach in 405 freeway. It's if you're from the area, you probably know what it is. If you're not from the area, it's actually a wonderful little tourist trap. So you might find interesting stuff there. Okay, right now it's 2:55. Why don't we take a break for 50 minutes, and when we come back, Johnny Liberty and Gino Casanova are going to share some very, very interesting information about freedom and about some strategies that you can put to use, also, again, to live free now. So let's take 13 minutes and be back at our seats ready to go, folks, at 10 minutes after 3, please.